a while since I toasted to a brand new week on a Sunday like this, so permit me to do so now. I look forward to a week that's a brand new indeed, and one that gives this brand new month a brand new spirit. To all of you working very hard to make Ghana a comfortable place, one person at a time. Amazing how a week full of industrial agitations just came to an end. Most affected, customers like you and myself. Unfortunately for us, we get our hard-earned cash deducted as source to pay them at the end of the month anyway. That's even if they decide to work or not. A week in which the mother body of journalists in Ghana maintained the status quo, even though many have raised questions about a few things on which we'll be shedding some light on, plus the drowning calls for passage of the Right to Information Law. Now, do not stone me yet for describing it as drowning, because I'll tell you why I say so in a bit. But going ahead, and with the past week, the National Communication Authority all of a sudden seems to have made the headlines. Is it killing a fly with a sledgehammer or sanitizing the airwaves, one data at a time? You'd always find some politics in there as well, and we will try to place all of the politics at the bottom of the hierarchy today. And I'm talking about the A+ versus Apia Stadium brouhaha, all of that going back and forth. My guests for today are Manasseh Azuriah-Winnie and Malik Abbas Dabu. They'll be joining me shortly. But today we'll be looking, like I said, at the wave of industrial actions in the public sector. And we're asking very significant questions. We're looking at ECG, the Metro Mass Transit. We're looking at the New Times Corporation, and indeed what happened earlier this year, the PURC. We'll also look at the Ghana Journalists Association, vis-a-vis the Right to Information Bill and what happened on it this week, especially that as the UN wanted us to remember that a day in this week was set aside to be the Right to Know Day. We'll also look at the National Communication Authority, of course, and what they're doing, clamping down on debtors, and then we'll look at Kolebu, Unibank, Stanbic versus A+ and Deputy Chiefs of Staff. Of course, I promise to make time for your comment if you do send them in. My name is Gifty Andwapia. Welcome to Editors Forum. All right, let's get going right now. I have been joined in the studio by my guests for today. Like I said, I have Malik Abbas Dabu, editor at myjoyonline.com. Malik, you're welcome.
Thank you.
I like the way you smile. It's very reassuring. I don't know what I can say about Manasseh's smile, by the way, but Manasseh Azuriah-Winnie is also here.
I
no.
don't need to copy you.
He just copied.
Certainly, because it's not a copy. What I'm saying is not a copy.
He copied me.
No, his is not as reassuring. I don't know if because
that's
I
the
know
point.
Manasseh.
When you copy,
you always end up with the imitation.
So.
Manasseh, you're welcome. It's good to have you both on the show.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's kickstart right now. Now, the past week has seen a series of labor agitations. We're talking about the ECG workers demanding severance packages to workers of the New Times Corporation, demanding that their managing director steps aside, while it seems to already have reaped some results, because perhaps we're not hearing of them so far. Others have had the relevant authority call their bluff. And I'm starting here with the ECG on the concession agreement. The workers who have over the years made different demands, all in opposition to that concession and the takeover, are demanding or making fresh demands for severance packages. While some workers in offices across the country stayed away from their workplaces, others staged protests affecting service delivery. Energy Minister Boakye Jako was concise with his position. Severance packages are meant for persons who have lost their jobs. So two choices: leave with a package or stay, because for the next 20 years, if it is job security you're concerned about, your security of tenure is assured. Let's watch or hear them, both the agitating workers and the minister. And when we come here, we'll talk about what ought to be, what lessons we ought to learn from this. Is it okay for you to just begin to wake up one day and decide that you're laying down your tools at the expense of the taxpayer? We'll have that conversation and more. Watch this.
The workers of the Public Utilities Workers Union, as they stated yesterday, are demonstrating, they are protesting. They want government to pay their severance packages to them, and they are appealing to government to intervene in this matter so that sanity would prevail. Today they've declared a 1-hour protest for showing their concern for the privatization of ECG, and we're speaking with the chairman of the council of the Public Workers Utility Company, and he is in the person of Paul Hayes. So what is currently happening?
Yeah, what is currently happening is that the staff of ECG are doing just a 1-hour sit-down strike just to show their concern of the severance they are demanding from the government before the compact is implemented. And like we have said earlier on before, this whole thing is to inform the president we are not really happy with the way the sector minister is handling this whole concession implementation. Then we are saying that it's high time the workers and then the staff of ECG, their stake is also being taken, and then their plea is also being listened to. We say by the Labour Act, we deserve a severance before a new company comes to take over. We have come up to say so many times, even though we are not happy about the concession, but since government is still bent on doing it, we are saying that what deserves the staffs and the workers, it should be given to them before the whole compact is implemented. That is all the little plight we are asking and demanding from the president.
They were concerned about their benefits. What happens to their benefits that they accrued in ECG? And we introduced the term of the art called grandfathering. And I know a lot of people have tried to make mischief of grandfathering. It simply means this. All the benefits you have accrued, benefits and entitlements you have accrued under ECG will be transferred lock, stock, and barrel to the new company, intact, without the new company having the right to alter the benefits previously accrued. Then we were also confronted with the desire that ECG workers be paid a severance, leaving ECG, and then before they move on to the new company. As for that one, Adabraka, if you decide to leave ECG, then you will be paid your severance. But you should not have the expectation or guarantee that the new company will take you on. You have made a decision to sever your relations with ECG, and it should not put you in the faithful expectation that going forward you have a job with. So it is open. All the ECG workers who want to leave and not join the new company are at liberty to do so, and their severance so arranged. But it's not going to be a collective bargaining situation where all ECG workers, all 6,500 of them, are paid a severance and then transferred to NewCo. You are at liberty to transfer yourself to NewCo and carry with you all your benefits from ECG and continue accruing new benefits. Equally at liberty to say that I want to wash my hands off electricity company and go my merry way. So these are the issues.
So those are the issues, and that is just ECG. Before we start this conversation and look perhaps at the nitty-gritties of the individual stories or individual companies that we're dealing with now, let me just bring to your attention that we want to touch on the bigger picture. Let's take it from the ECG, what happened with the Metro Mass Transit this week, what happened some time ago, I think about 4 weeks or so ago with the PURC, what happened last week with the New Times Corporation, and I'm sure that the list could go, yeah, I think I've basically covered all. The question I'm asking is it fair? Is it fair to all of us who pay taxes that, first of all, we get to be the people who are worst hit? Because if the workers decide not to work and they have issues with the government, they have issues with their employees, you and I, who are customers, are the ones who get to suffer the most. And worst of it all, at the end of the month, we still have to pay them. Personally, it does not make sense to me. I don't know if perhaps it makes sense to you, Manasseh. Does it?
It does, based on what it has, is at stake. If they have genuine concerns to raise or express, you don't expect them to shut up just because they are failure to work or their strike is likely to cause inconvenience. And I am not saying that everything that has happened, I endorse it or the workers are right. But I also know that there are times that management only listens when you strike. I remember when I was the SRC president of GIJ, we had a problem with our library. The library was supposed to close at 8 because we had morning and afternoon or evening students. The evening students came at 4 and closed at 8. Now the library was closing at 4, meaning those who were to come at 8 were deprived, and those of us who wanted to stay on and read were also deprived. We went to management for a number of meetings, the SRC executive. Each time we went, they told us problems after problems, and they would fix it. They were not fixing it. So one day, I decided to go to the library at about 4 o'clock. Then the librarian came that please, everybody should leave. We're about to close the library. So I stood up, hit the table and said, nobody should leave this library. If anybody is a man or a woman, let them lock us here in this library and we'll see who owns GIG. And the students were so happy, nobody left.
But was that responsible on your part?
It was extremely responsible. And let me end the story.
Okay.
They went to report me to the registrar, then Mr. Ebenezer Enim. Then he called me to his office. President, as for this, we beg you, today is Friday, it's already late. I promise you by Monday we'll fix this problem. And by Monday, the problem was fixed and the library was closing at 8. So what kept them away from solving the problem until I had to come in with this radical move?
Knowing that they could have dealt with it, especially the speed with which they dealt with it, meant that they had the capacity.
Yes, so sometimes I don't want us to be in a hurry to judge or condemn workers when they strike or use some of these unorthodox means to address their problems. And strikes are just a part of the legitimate means of addressing problems. So I think coming from that angle, I would say we should look at it case by case basis.
Okay.
And if you look at what the ECG workers are demanding, I personally do not side with them because we accuse our parliamentarians of taking their pensions when they are not going on pension or retirement. Every 4 years they take ex gratia. So if that principle is to be applied, why do you want a severance package when you are continuing with your employment in at least the next 20 years to come?
Because initially the concerns that they had raised was that you're going to change ownership. Once the employers are going to change, then the presupposes that we are not safe, we are not secure. Our position here as staff of the ECG isn't secured. So then they started agitating. But now they've been giving all the assurance that, look, it's secured for the next at least 20 years. So it beats imagination and understanding that they will still come up with this severance thing. But since you're dealing with that particular case, even though I would have wanted us to, finish dealing with the bigger picture, then we move down. What then do you make of the minister's response?
I think it is very accurate for me.
Adabraka.
That's what I would have said if I were in his shoes, because for them to even talk about the insecurity, should they decide or should they move on with this current or the next employer? If you sense insecurity, then I think they should have been fighting for a clause in the new arrangement that says if this person comes and wants to lay us off, they will be entitled to a full severance package.
I think that has been done.
Yes, so I'm saying that if they were even talking about the insecurity, that's what they could have said. So if you decide to come and then lay off anybody, then this is what we will take before we go home.
Right.
But you can't decide to stay on and enjoy the benefit of what you would have gotten if you decided to leave, or if they had cut you off from getting on board the new ship.
Okay, when we finish talking about the bigger picture, we'll look at how then this can be solved moving forward. So that tomorrow, for instance, on Monday, we don't wake up and as journalists having to chase people around with our cameras again who are agitating and at the expense of the customer. And I say that all the time, the taxpayer. Malik, for you, let's start with the bigger picture as well. Is there some kind of political agenda being championed here? Because there's a possibility as well that even though, as Manasseh makes the point, it appears that the only language that authority or people in authority seem to understand is agitation. That's when you begin to shake them, and then they begin to take the responsibility that was already theirs, that they have shared. They begin to take those responsibility. But it also provides an avenue for people to begin to champion their own political agenda, so that all I need is to make the union agitate. All I need is to make the union understand the issues from my point of view and say that, look, I don't like Malik. I don't want us to work with Malik because Malik was working with the former administration. Let's push Malik out. So all I have to do is get other workers here in multimedia to maybe agree with me. I could do anything, give them money, talk to them, you know, whatever, and get them to support me. Then I'll begin to push an agenda, which may, in the long run, be not be in the interest of the nation per se.
Am I permitted to say I have nothing useful to add?
Please.
To what he has said.
You have already said that. So add what you have to add, even as unuseful as it may be.
Okay, so you laid a very good premise about sometimes the undertones.
Yeah.
And given that we are incurably divided as a nation along political lines, you can't rule out the possibility that some of these agitations may have political undercurrents and undertones. But having said that, I think largely people take these kinds of steps when they believe, and I'm using the word believe. Sometimes the belief is not founded, but sometimes they genuinely believe that they have a cause. You know, we are a very suspicious society. Rumor mongering has been given a certain acceptability, legitimacy. So sometimes all it takes is one person to just create a certain rumor about the living conditions of the people at the top who are taking the decisions, and then it serves as a rallying point for people to mobilize and to say, look, these are the things which are going, which are not correct. Because a lot of the time when you go in, the allegations are not true. Sometimes they are true, other times they are not true.
Right.
But whether they are true or not, they tend to serve as a basis for people to mobilize and to take the kinds of mass actions that have formed the subject of this discussion that we are having. So, so I'm not surprised that these things tend to happen. Sometimes when they are founded, what the authorities should do is take practical steps to deal with them, as happened in Manasseh's case. Other times when they are not founded, what the authorities should do is to be transparent and honest with the people.
Right.
Because I heard the board chairman of Metro Mass, for example, Ahmed Atta, and his argument was that first the allegation that they bought a V8, a Toyota Land Cruiser V8 for the chief executive of Metro Mass was not true. Now, if that is true, how did the workers come to believe that this has happened? The only way to resolve the problem is to be transparent and to be honest and to open the books and to let the people see what is going on and to demonstrate to them that you are not taking things which do not belong to you or which you don't deserve, and that you are genuinely working in the interests of the institution. When the workers believe that their managers are working in the supreme interest of the institution, they most likely will listen to you. If they genuinely believe that you exist only to fleece the institution and to make your own living conditions better, then no amount of appeals can assuage their frustrations and get them to contribute their best to the running of the institution. But because when they understand and they appreciate what the challenges are, sometimes they are the first to talk to others to accept whatever situation that there are.
But not when they have a political agenda, Malik, that when they have it, as long as you exist in that company, you will not be their very good friend.
Which is absolutely true. And sometimes they actually resist change.
Exactly.
Sometimes when you are going to bring about change, so you get into the institution and there are practices which are not in tandem with whatever objectives that you have in terms of moving the institution forward, you may have people gang up against you. But if you are leading with honesty and integrity, sometimes you will survive the onslaught.
Let me bring Manasseh in. I've already seen how itchy you are to say something about this. It's good to be.
And he's going to disagree with me. I know him.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you.
Unfortunately for you today.
Which is very strange.
I'm not disagreeing with you, except to add that sometimes you talk about the people being political. You have to also ask, how did the leaders behave when they were in office? There are some of these managers, board members, board chairpersons who occupy certain positions, and they care nothing about the institution. Everything they seem to push is what would further the interest of their political parties. Right. So if you are working under such a person and then there's a change of power, normally you see where things are. And go to state media organizations. You're in the newsroom and you know that these are the NDC journalists and these are the NPP journalists. And when NDC is in power, some particular group of journalists are very powerful.
They are the gurus in the
newsroom. And if NDC is in power, you have another set of journalists.
I have noted a broad smile on Gifty's face when you mentioned this.
Yes.
Oh, really? Oh, because what?
I know she knows.
My mind, no, I know. I have a certain picture in my mind.
Yes.
But that has nothing to do with this. Manasseh, please go ahead.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that sometimes we don't have to fault only the followers,
right,
but the leaders. Because when you take up a position, even if the president appoints you, you are working for the people of Ghana.
Okay.
It is not the president's pocket money which is used to pay you. You are paid from whatever they take from all of us.
Right.
So you have to work in the interest of the people. And when the cause is genuine, when the workers are agitating and people know that it's genuine, we know. If it is not, sometimes it will go and come, but we will eventually get to know the motive.
It's one of the questions that I want to ask about we as journalists getting that difficult balance, because you know, as a journalist, you're trained to speak for the masses, to perhaps speak for the larger constituents, okay, or the larger constituency. But in this case, if the larger constituency have been able to get their acts together and are speaking against it, so like Malik was saying, there's also a point about consistently trying to stop you from implementing some sort of change. So people are change averse, it appears naturally. So you go into a particular company and you're trying to introduce some changes. And that's what that's a lot of argument that have come with the port system, for example, the paperless port system. There have been calls that, look, people want to sabotage the system, etc. So it's like you go in there, you want to introduce something new, you want to introduce something different, some level of efficiency, but people wake up or people get up and they're up in arms against it. But as a journalist, where do you strike that very delicate balance? Who then are you speaking for? Because if you are doing stories, perhaps that's more of on the side of the management. They perhaps say, oh, you know, they've given them something. If you're talking for so much for the agitating workers, it's like, look, we are trying to implement some changes here and the people are against it. How do you strike that very difficult balance? Let me start with you, Malik.
Okay, so you make the point about who do you speak for. And of course, I know that you recognize that we as journalists, we don't speak for anyone. I guess the point you're making is who gets more access to tell their side of the story. What we strive to do, and I know that this is a struggle that all of us go through every day in the course of our job. What we strive to do is to create a situation where everyone is heard and everyone gets to tell their side of the story. Because we don't take positions, we don't have an interest when these matters come up. What interest we have is to ensure that everyone gets to tell their story, be they the masses or the managers. Okay. You create that even balance for either side to tell their story.
And Malik, with that, I want you to, the masses you mentioned, we're looking at two types of masses here, I'll say. Because you're looking at those who are agitating, the workers who are agitating for perhaps a genuine cause, and the customers against whom their actions are, you know, hitting. And
a lot of the time we try to create opportunities for all. For example, when we covered the story about the botched call for a sit-down strike by University Teachers Association of Ghana, what we did was to hear those who made the call, provided opportunity for those who were opposed to the call to speak, and then we spoke to students. So in that case, you hear every side of the story, because you don't take a position as a journalist. You want everybody to tell their story so that we say our listeners are discerning, and those who watch us are discerning. They hear both sides of the story and they are able to make a determination as to whose story adds up and whose story doesn't add up. In the end, we can't take a position. Occasionally, depending on the story, you may take a certain crusading position which is what this young man tends to take on some occasions. But largely,
like GJA, which is something we'll talk about much later.
yeah, and we lost, or he lost.
Okay, because if you say we, I don't know you as part of the Crusaders.
He lost. No, I didn't crusade,
Okay,
but if I was voting, I would have voted against the victor.
Dear. Let's deal with the demonstrations.
Yes, so largely we create opportunity for everyone to tell their story. After all, we don't speak for them. We allow the people to speak for themselves because we recognize that they are capable of speaking for themselves. That if we, the journalists, then begin to speak for them, we lose that authority to be an impartial arbiter.
Right. Okay. Let me bring you in, Manasseh. I don't know if you have anything to add to that bit of the conversation. If you do, by the way, do add this to it for me. We've seen a wave of it, and this is in the first year of the new administration. I must be very honest. I don't have the facts to speak to what has happened in the past. I mean, the trend, what has happened in the past. Even though we do know when it comes to, violent takeovers and all, but this is quite different. Okay, so this is not like a violent takeover. This is people in the company saying that our conditions of service are poor, this and that. Does it tell you anything, the wave of do you see that this is something that we're going to see more of in the very near future? Or does it tell you anything about what has happened in the past?
Well, if you look at what has happened, I don't think it has anything to do with a change in government or whatever.
Okay.
Some aspect of it may have, but generally, they are not all the same. If you take PURC, they felt some management members made themselves demigods. And with the backing of the previous administration, they seemed to terrorize the workers. So they were up in arms to agitate and fight for their rights. And in this case, they want the people to leave.
Yeah.
If you take ECG, theirs is quite different. A new company is coming to take over, and they are not so sure about their future, and they want the maximum benefit from that takeover.
Okay.
If you go to Times, theirs is also a totally different thing.
Isn't it political? Doesn't it look to you?
I do not think so, because I have ever spoken to a journalist at the Ghanaian Times, and when he told me how much he earned, I was shocked. This was not just an ordinary journalist. This was someone who was winning an award before I got to the Ghana Institute of Journalism.
Right.
So there are genuine concerns there, but this should also teach us all a lesson. That if you're in an organization, you should work as if it is for your father. We have this term in Ghana. It's a company for my father. I am Papa dear. So people are messing up, and when the company is messed up, everybody suffers. If you look at these ECG's problems, it's not only the government which is indebted to ECG for which reason they are in trouble. You have some workers of ECG who connive with people to bypass their meters and do a lot of terrible things, and the nation loses money. So eventually, when the company collapses, everybody suffers. So when these things are going on, we should not only look at the fact that, well, the workers need to be treated well. How have they also contributed to the terrible situation or condition in which they find themselves?
I think I have to add to this one. It's, I don't know whether it's a cultural problem, but it's a big, big problem. It's a big problem across cultures, across religions, across sectors, across whether private or public. It's a big problem that people simply do not earn their keep. And people feel that if you work for an institution and you put in your best, you are a fool. You must work, you must preserve yourself, you must work.
Work to rule.
You must work to rule. If you can steal from the company, you must do as much as you possibly can. And if you don't steal from the company, you are a fool. And it's so pervasive. It's amazing that we believe in this kind of culture. And people don't recognize that the health of the institution, the performance of the institution, the progress of the institution are inextricably linked to their personal growth and their personal development. that you find people working for an institution and they deliberately undermine the institution for which they work. And you ask yourself, if the institution does not flourish, do they recognize that their own job is on the line? And it is so common for people to work for an institution and to speak ill of the institution, and wish the institution bad luck and ill will, and to steal from the institution when they can, and to complain when they can't steal from the institution. And when people stop them from stealing from the institution, they hate those people.
Would you say also blame that a bit on leadership? Because there are times that people actually want to do their best. There are times that people actually want to put in their best or make change happen. But then again, if the management are benefiting from the status quo, which might be as negative as possible, they won't allow you to get that through. And if you're not careful, as a small fish, you lose your job.
I think it's just an excuse.
You think so?
The excuse that, well, the big men don't do this, and the big men don't do that, and the big man don't do this. The same people who are complaining, when you elevate them to the status of the big man, they will do the same thing. They may even do worse. So I think it's an excuse to always say that some other person is not doing something. That is why you can't do their job. We always point the finger at some other person. We ignore the fact that a lot more fingers are pointing at us. We believe that when we get into a job, we have to make all the money we want in the first day, and we can solve all our problems in that first day. And when that doesn't happen, then people are frustrated and agitated, and and so, and that means that it is not the
okay.
And it is not your salary. It is when you are able to cut corners and make money from people that you are supposed to deliver a service to. You must take extra payments from them to deliver the service to them. And everybody gets into an institution, and when people are in a company, they are looking for parts of the company where they can make extra money apart from their salary.
Okay.
And if you move them away from that, they will hurt you.
But in these difficult economic times, you need to get something on the side, don't you?
Well, that's the point. It's the reason why we have legitimized stealing.
How do you then advise that this sort of, you know, this thing is dealt with, that there's some sort of balance, that you give what you're earning of the company, you give off what you're earning, you know, from the company, and at the end of the day, you're still able to make ends meet. People
must recognize that if the institution for which you work fails, you fail. If that institution doesn't prosper, you don't prosper. You must recognize that you only get paid because the institution makes money. If the institution doesn't make money, if you don't work in a manner which creates value, and everybody must recognize that it is when everybody works, everybody puts in their bit, that you can create value, and you can share that value by way of salaries and benefits to everyone. If you don't put in your best and everybody comes in and they put in a half day's work or a quarter day's work, and everybody does that and the institution collapses, all the people who were working with STC before it was revamped, when it collapsed, what happened to them?
They lost their job.
At the time that they were working for the institution and all manner of nefarious activities were going on and people were cutting corners and making money, they did not recognize that their jobs depended on the performance of the institution.
Okay. We've spent quite a lot of time on this. Let's wrap up by talking about the expectations moving forward, even though we couldn't go into it one after the other. And there was the issue of the MMT as well, where the workers, you know, have also had their own grievances, except that the intensity of their actions appears to be much higher. They refused to work. They staged a demonstration over 2 days, which saw the seizure of the vehicle, car keys of some of their managers, and then they deflated their car tires. They claim to suffer from poor working conditions due to mismanagement, and they accuse their leaders also of plans to purchase, like Malik said, a vehicle for the managing director, while there are no spare parts available for their buses. And we all know the story of the MMT and how poorly it's been managed over the years. I mean, if you go into it, you hear very sad stories. We've done a couple of stories where we did not know where some of the vehicles were. They were broken down. They were just left to rot and things like that. And you ask yourself whether or not this would be happening if it was a private business, if it was a private organization just dealing, you know, you ask yourself, will people be agitating as much? Are people agitating as much in the private sector? And I find myself answering that question with a no. Malik, going into the next, I mean, today is a Sunday, so we've started the week. What are your expectations from the ECG? Does what the minister says, you know, last week end it all? At the MMT, the board chairman has come out to say we're not buying any vehicles. I mean, whether that is true or not, does it settle the matter, or looking forward into the next week you expect? I think you've spoken quite a lot. Let me start with Manasseh on that. Or you expect that there will still be some more agitations, of course, taxpayer losing out on that?
Well, I cannot preempt. I don't know what they are planning, and as to whether or not they will agitate will depend on how satisfied or otherwise they are with the current arrangements or the explanations that have been given. But I would also expect that if they are to agitate further, they should come out with superior arguments for which reason they are agitating. Because if you take the MMT one, the board chairman seemed to suggest that the information they had for which they embarked on these strikes, that information was not accurate. So if they are to go forward based on that same information, then they should prove to us why that information is accurate, and perhaps give better reasons. But if you listen to what happened, it looked like some level of compromise was reached. And
between the workers and the management?
Yes, and we don't always have to blame them. Sometimes you go to some of the companies, the MD lives like a king, and people who do the day-to-day work, those on whose shoulders the actual work sits, they are treated like slaves. They cannot, the MD takes so much, and at the end of the day, the company makes provision for their children's school fees. Meanwhile, the driver who is supposed to keep MMT going cannot even afford a decent accommodation. So we should find a way of bridging this gap, because sometimes when the working class gets angry and they feel cheated, they can do anything. Okay. That is not to say they don't have a role to play in all of this. Sometimes some of them just decide to run down the company, and for me, I don't think there's ever any good reason to do what is wrong. If you're not satisfied with the organization, the best thing to do is to leave. I don't think you should. See, because I'm not paid well, I would steal from the company. That doesn't make sense in any way.
And it doesn't also make sense when you go deflating the ties of your of management. I think that's also taking the law into your own hands. But Malik, your thoughts on this?
So let's start with ECG. Okay. And Manasseh has spoken a lot about some of the negative attitudes that tend to undermine the progress of the institution. And I have had serious experiences with ECG. My colleague Nathan applied for a separate meter in the house in which he lived, and he had known the district manager of ECG, so he speaks to the woman and then the lady, and then she made arrangement for them to come and fix the meter. Whilst at work, Nathan gets a call from his landlord. The people who have come, they want to talk to you. What's the problem? They need money from him to buy more cable to connect to the meter so that he will get light, because where they have connected the meter, the extent of cable that ECG regulations permit them to use, they have used it, and it cannot give him power. So he has to give them money so that they will provide more cable so that he can get power. Nathan says, okay, thank you. You go. I will call your district manager and tell her what you have said. And then they start begging. Okay, you don't worry, we will do it for you. And quickly, they connect it for him. My own experience, when I applied for a separate meter when I lived at Kaneshi, they came and placed the meter there, and they didn't start it. They had a universal remote which they will use to start the meter so that you can get power. They didn't start it. I had to look for them and found them around the Audomi roundabout. They went back, just started the thing, and demanded money from me.
And you paid?
I gave them 5 cedis at the time. The guy said it was not enough. And my ID card was lying on the table, so I just picked my ID card and I showed him, and I said, do you want me to take a matter up? Are you supposed to take money from me for just starting the
So we should take you on, actually, for paying 5 cedis.
I didn't pay. I just gave the money.
Okay, like you thought that, okay.
So it was a gift.
And when I moved out of that house and applied for another meter, they send somebody to come and you have to place a board and then they will come and inspect it. They sent somebody, the person came and inspected it, went away. Then I made a follow-up. They said, well, the guy who came and inspected it has gone on leave, so you have to send another person to come and inspect it. And when the person comes, you have to pay his transportation, you have to give him money back. If you don't do, they won't come and inspect it. And these are widely known. These are people who earn a salary every month for doing this job. And yet when they come and do it, you have to pay. And there's nobody who applies and gets a separate meter without going through this process and paying this money. You have to pay. And yet they earn a salary. When you do these kinds of things, and Manasseh earlier was talking about they helping other people to bypass their system so that they don't get billed and then they take money from under the table and help them to get power for which they don't pay. These are workers who are supposed to be concerned about the performance of the institution. The people who are protesting now, they are the same people who help other citizens to bypass the systems and to make money, including
and to
foreign
make the
companies.
company lose.
Absolutely. And yet, they are the people complaining. We are not saying that all of them are bad. Sure. We are saying that these practices are so widespread, they are so pervasive, and yet nothing gets done about them.
Okay.
So when you do this and you start complaining, we have every right to be wondering about your own commitment to helping your institution to stay on its feet. So for me, I think that the minister made compelling arguments about you can't ask for severance package whilst you still work for the company. And the company is being given to a new management. It does not mean that the company is going to change. Because under the terms under which the company is being taken over, you don't lose anything. So to make an argument for severance package is a very difficult one to convince anybody with.
So the minister does...
So I think that he made a compelling argument, and I believe that going forward, I don't expect the workers to push this thing.
I mean, I love that word, and the way he uses it. It's like, you know, we're at our wit's end. It's like, you know, these are the options available. Take the money and leave. You want to stay, keep quiet and do the job. Your security of tenure is secured. I will see how it goes. Tomorrow is Monday. Hopefully there won't be any agitations that will disrupt your own convenience as a taxpayer and someone who rightfully should be served by these organizations. Let's move a bit forward and talk about the NCA. Very soon we'll be talking about the GJA as well, and then we'll look a bit at the politics that's ongoing with A+ and all of those people. But the National Communication this week cracked the whip, so to speak, on a number of stations that have failed to obey some aspect of the Communications Act. This has seen as many as 131 stations either have their licenses revoked or handed hefty fines by the NCA. Now, the minority in Parliament has already raised concerns about this move, with others saying it's a ploy to put some anti-government media organizations out of business. Let's start this conversation, and I wish that I could break it down so you know who owes what, and the kind of action that's been brought against them. But I'm sure that our panelists here can help. The NCA, I'm not really sure if this surprises you. Some people are quite surprised. Like, so people owe this much. People are owing millions of cedis, and they've been working. There've been a bit of the politics, but let's deal with the surprise element, the efficiency, so to speak, of the NCA. What has changed, and why now?
Well, I am not surprised that radio stations would owe that amount of money.
Okay.
I am just surprised that we expected them to pay such amount of money, because a lot of the radio stations I know, they take the frequencies and do whatever they want to do with them. You go to the station, there's so much noise. You go there and have a handful of people who are there, and they don't pay them. If you go across the country, yes, quite a lot of them are not paid. They are not workers, and some are not even like community radio stations fighting a good cause. I think I saw Radio Progress in Y as one of them, and I think Radio Progress, if you go to Y, is one of the, it's a community radio station.
It's a community radio
that is doing a lot of good work,
yeah.
And a lot of the people there are volunteers. So
And Manasseh, now that you mentioned that, let me give you some interesting details that I got from there. I was in a meeting with some of them, and do you know how much they pay? They're paid. You get paid 7 cedis for 3 hours on air. 7 cedis, as in 7 Ghana cedis.
Yes.
70,000 old Ghana cedis.
Well, that's even a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
Some don't pay at all. A lot of the people who work for these media houses. So when you attend the program and they are fighting over what has become known as solely, that's what people live on. There are lots of people who don't pay. So sometimes if you are in multimedia, we have what we call claims. As if you attend a program and the company does not give you a car, you come back and write and they pay you. What we take as claims here,
someone's monthly,
it's more than someone's monthly salary. And some are not even paid at all. If you go to the regions, you speak to your colleagues, and it's like, well, some are there just because of the fame. Some are there to also further certain courses. And like I said, some are there to also get something from these event organizers and all.
yeah.
So if you have such things happening, then you can be sure that they won't be able to meet their financial obligation. But I was a bit surprised when I heard about the figures. For some, you can be sure that expecting them to pay this money is like asking them to close down because they can't afford it. I got very angry at first because I thought it was a bit too harsh, but I was later told that it is according to the law. In my own view, they should at least do something about the law because it's a bit too difficult for some of them to cope.
And I think that there ought to be a whole conversation raised about public community radio stations, and that's something that I try to understand over the weekend. Like, what's the model? Who does the money go to? Because they're taking as low as 7 cedis as well for adverts. I'm told that most of the adverts that come in are funeral announcements and stuff, and funeral announcement, every one of them, they take 7 cedis. I mean, but these are people who, in Sierra Leone, I mean, during the Ebola crisis, community radio stations was one of the most effective ways of getting the information out there as to what to do, like how people should take care of themselves, wash your hand. They used a lot of the community radio stations. So these are channels for development. So I think that we should have a bigger conversation about
I think some
role.
of them should be exempted, like the WA case.
Yeah.
You go there, you have time with the assembly. The WA Municipal Assembly has 8 slots. They go there to educate the people on sanitation, diseases, some of the progress and the challenges they face. And they virtually offer this airtime for free.
Yeah.
You can get that platform here on Joy FM or Asempo FM, which is a commercial radio station.
Right.
So if you want to treat such entities like you treat the commercial ones, I think it's a bit problematic. So I think, I'm not saying the law should not be enforced, but the reality on the ground does not support the enforcement, especially those that are found to be using their frequencies for the building of society. There are some that I would not sympathize with, but
Like?
I cannot name names here. It is said that it's better to be bold and fearless, but sometimes you have to be a coward.
I see.
Yes,
That's
so,
Manasseh saying that, you know, right? So you know that freedom of speech ends somewhere, right? Okay.
Oh, yes. I don't want to...
You've had enough suits.
Oh, no, I can be sued for this, and I don't really fear those suits. If I believe in a cause, I should be prepared to go to jail for that cause. And so those suits cannot intimidate me. But sometimes you just have to respect the sensibilities of others. Someone is facing the probability of being shut down, and if you sit on TV and hit at them, you would hurt them more. So that's the only reason. But all that I'm saying is that sometimes we should be able to separate the private commercial entities from those that are out there doing public service.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Malik, let me bring you in on this.
Do I agree with Manasseh? Absolutely not. And my reasons are simple. I think we have a certain mentality, the coconut seller mentality.
Which is?
We run businesses in the manner that the coconut seller runs his business. He wakes up in the morning, takes his coconut, puts in a wheelbarrow, and wheels to wherever he wants including in front of Joy FM, and he sells. No regulations, no registration, nothing, absolutely nothing. You cannot run a radio station like that. If you take authorization to run a radio station and for 17 years, you have not renewed it, meanwhile there is a law which requires that you should renew it, you are supposed to pay some money and there are penalties, and the law is clear to everyone that from the day that you are taking this frequency, these are the obligations that are imposed on you by law, and on the basis of those obligations you can operate your radio station. The objects for which you operate the radio station are immaterial. The law says if you take this frequency, which is a national resource, this is how you ought to use it in accordance with such regulations, rules and regulations. If you go and put it there and you forget about it and you keep running it like the coconut seller will run their business, when the law catches up with you, you cannot say that the law is harsh. Because remember that these amounts you are talking about are penalties. Penalties imposed on the company for years of neglect.
Okay.
That they have just taken the frequency, they have forgotten that they have a frequency, and there are laws guiding the use of the frequency.
Right.
So Manasseh, how can you mediate? How can you intervene? How can you plead for clemency on behalf of somebody who takes a national resource to go and use and does not follow the law?
Manasseh, you have an answer?
I have an answer. I did not know, but the premise was I did not say what they did is right. I said what they did is wrong. And the renewal and all of that has to do with money. If you go into this, the only reason, it may not be the only reason, one of the reasons someone would not go is because they don't even have what it takes to go and then pay or even renew their license.
Does it then, if we're following up on Malik's points, that
so
it's okay to sanitize the space?
No, I said at the beginning that I'm not faulting the NCA, because if everybody is allowed to do what they want, they will mess up the whole system, and this is also a public commodity. And if you look at how some of these people even get their frequencies, sometimes you speak to people and they tell you, if you have political connection, you can go and then get a radio frequency. And if someone has a lot of capital to set up a media house, employ people and pay them, they may not get the frequency just because they are not connected or affiliated to any political party. So at the end of the day, a lot of things come into play. So I'm not in any way faulting the NCA.
Which is why some people have said that, Manasseh, that there are some political undertones here. That and I was listening to a conversation on one of the politically affiliated or partisan political stations, and they said that last year we went through a whole lot of help from governments, because I'm not quite sure exactly what they did, but they went through a whole lot of sanctions from government for doing one thing or the other, and their argument is that in the meantime, okay, so let me just mention the station's code so it makes it clearer. Oman FM was saying that last year they had to buy gadgets and go outside the country to buy gadgets because some of their conversations or things were being truncated, some of their radio programs were being truncated, etc. And then Montier FM, for instance, is one of those stations that we are being told have to pay some of those hefty amounts. So if you look at these contrasting stations and what has happened to them last year under a different administration, and this year what's happening under a different administration, doesn't just only makes it clear that there's some kind of political...
No. The question is, somebody has arrested you, that you have stolen. There is evidence that you have stolen. So why would you want to read other meanings into why you've been arrested for stealing? If you hadn't stolen, then you can sit back or sit up and say, I have not done this. And the reason they are doing this is because I'm affiliated or I'm seen or presumed to be affiliated to one political party, for which reason.
We are beyond presumption.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, we shouldn't allow this to get into the conversation. If this radio station was able to tell us that, well, I had everything or I have everything right, I have not violated the law, I have paid, I have renewed my license, everything, and I have the documents. So why should you want to target me? If they're able to say that, then everybody would sympathize with them.
Okay.
But if it is true that you owe and you could not renew, there are sanctions or penalties imposed on you, and you have no contrary evidence, then what you should be saying is to appeal to them to temper justice with mercy. But if you want to go the usual political way, in Ghana, everyone else is politically affiliated. And once you bring that in, we mar the conversation.
Yeah, we destroy the argument.
Is a suggestion being made that because a particular institution, person, agency is affiliated politically, it should be exempt from the application of the law? Is that a suggestion?
I doubt.
That once you are politically affiliated, when we are applying the law, we should exempt you, because if you violate the law or you act in a manner which is inconsistent with the rules and regulations provided for under the law, we should exempt you, because as soon as we apply the law against you, it is because of your political affiliation.
But to what extent has the NCA itself has been effective when it sat down all these years to watch them operate when they were violating laws, obviously, and all of a sudden emerge? You know?
Okay, so you can fault the NCA. What about the people who violated the law? You are saying that the NCA should have been holding a K on somebody to respect the law.
I mean, for many years.
So the person who willfully violated the law, what should we say about that person or that institution?
Okay.
Can we say that all of these companies are in the kind of precarious position such as you are citing Radio Progress in WA? Absolutely not. Do we know what the authorization fee is? Can we say that the fee is so punitive that stations can't pay? Absolutely not.
Okay.
We are finding the amounts to be high only because it's a penalty. And the law says if you don't pay by this time, you will pay this penalty every day. And if you haven't renewed your license for 17 years and we calculate the penalty and multiply it every day for 17 years, it certainly will be tens of millions. It does not mean that the authorization fee that you ought to have paid, if you are acting in accordance with the law, is so hefty that stations cannot pay.
Okay. Shall we then look at DJA? Now that we've mentioned, I mean, yeah, you cannot fault the NCA. I think that the NCA would have done us all a lot of good if they had done their jobs. You know, whatever the number of years that these people have been defaulting on the payments, that they could have done us all a lot better by working and not all of a sudden just bringing this sort of threatening sanction. Some seem to be threatening to, you know, bring all of them down.